Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Chungmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is Thursday, September 26th, about 5 p.m. We have a lot of financial news that we need to discuss today. But before we do that, I just want to point out that for those of you who cannot actually see what's going on here in the podcast room, Chungmin is not here with us. Instead, I am joined by our junior correspondent, Joon Ha Park.
Hello. Good to be back.
All right, awesome. Let's get into it.
All right. So there's a takeover battle that's intensifying as investors are increasing the bid for Korea Zinc recently.
All right. So normally we would not cover M&A, that's mergers and acquisitions here at Korea Pro all that much. But the reason why we're talking about this one is just because of how big this target company is, Korea Zinc. Now, there are two entities that are trying to acquire a much larger stake at Korea Zinc. And those are MBK Partners, which is a private equity firm, and Poong, which is Korea Zinc's largest shareholder. Now, those two latter companies, Poong and Korea Zinc, have a long history, but we won't get into that right now. But what the points we're trying to raise that they're trying to acquire Korea Zinc, and they've put in a lot of money into it. They've actually upped the value of Korea Zinc to $1.7 billion based on their bidding right now.
Okay.
Now, the reason why we're talking about this, though, because it has such a large implication for this. Korea Zinc, as the name suggests, produces a lot of zinc. It's a smelter. But the reason why this is important is that zinc is a crucial element that goes into things like EV batteries. And that's why there are a lot of companies who also own shares in Korea Zinc besides the ones that we just mentioned. For example, Hanwha and LG Chemicals, they also have a vested interest in Korea Zinc because the zinc is crucial for them. But it's not just about this. It's also about the workers. Because we have to remember that MBK, I'm not sure how many people know this, but MBK Partners was the private equity firm that purchased Home Plus, the retail store, back in 2015. And since 2015 up till now, over the past 9 years, because MBK Partners was trying to recoup a lot of their losses, recoup the money that they spent on their investments. They ended up cutting costs, and the way they cut costs is that over the past 9 years, they shut down over 20 retail outlets. So which has led to a number of people losing their jobs. But beyond what's going on in Korea, it's also impacting what's going on in Australia.
Right.
And that's because Korea Zinc has also invested heavily in renewable energies.
Okay.
And because of their assets that they've invested in Australia, a lot of people in Australia are looking at things going like, okay, if this private equity firm succeeds in acquiring Korea Zinc, what kind of strategies are they going to pursue? Are they going to pursue long-term strategies, or are they going to really focus on short-term gains? Because if it does, renewable energies might be one of the first things to get cut. So there are a lot of implications for a lot of different people, and people are just paying attention to this like hawks right now.
Right. Okay. So just moving on then. So South Korea just launched a $7.5 billion push for AI manufacturing modernization. Could you tell us a little about what the kind of government support entails?
Yeah, what this really is, the big thing that the South Korean government really made is this thing called AI Plus. Now, AI Plus, as generic as that name might sound, comprises a lot of different things. It comprises insurance, loan programs, rather generous loan programs actually, where they charge you much lower interest rates than most other things. And the purpose for this is to ensure that a lot of South Korean manufacturers begin to adopt AI into their manufacturing processes. And this whole AI Plus program comes up to about $7.5 billion. So it's not exactly chump change. It's a big amount of money here.
So there's an initiative to put AI into South Korean companies. So what's the risk for companies then?
Well, I'm not sure if we can really call it a risk because it's cheap money for a lot of these businesses. And
Okay, so then how would they struggle then to compete globally?
Well, that's the big part. Yes, $7.5 billion is no small change, but that's pretty much what a lot of other countries spend as well. For example, Taiwan spent $7.3 billion this year. And if you look at what's going on in Japan and the US, they are doing a lot of localizations, onshoring, trying to bring in a lot more businesses back into their shores. But of course, the really big fish in the sea is China. Because if you're looking at China, China spent about $38 billion on AI this year. And they are going to spend a lot more in the coming years. And so, because of this enormous fish in the ocean, it's not clear if South Korea will be, well, perhaps I shouldn't try to minimize this. It's going to be extremely challenging for South Korean firms to try to be competitive, to try to produce at scale when China is right next door.
So then the one thing that I just wanted to ask is that does that mean that South Korea risks falling behind in the global AI race then?
Well, the president gave a speech not too long ago, and he said that he aims to make South Korea one of the top 3 AI producing countries in the world. But who are the other 2 countries going to be if South Korea is going to be one of them? Are we going to say that we are going to join the US and China? Then by that definition, is the president saying that we're going to overtake Japan? The 4th largest economy in the world? I'm not quite sure exactly if that vision can come to fruition. Now, obviously, South Korean companies is going to give it the old college try, but we are playing at the big leagues right now. And compared to other countries, South Korea is not spending nearly enough money.
Right. So just moving on then. So South Korea, they had, there was news this morning that South Korea was expected to suffer another massive tax revenue shortfall in 2024.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing thing since over the past 2 years.
Right. So what does this mean for the forecast then?
Well, we were just talking about how South Korea is only spending $7.5 billion. And this is part of the reason why. South Korea simply does not have the kind of tax revenues that it needs. And this is just going to get worse and worse because, as everyone knows, South Korea is an aging society. As people get older, the tax base where the government can actually get tax revenue from, that base is going to get smaller, and those who are going to be tax dependent, those who are going to rely on healthcare, on pensions, that's going to get larger. And so this is going to be an ongoing problem. Now, politically, this is going to cause a lot of back and forth between the ruling party and the opposition Democratic Party. The ruling party has said that we need to cut taxes for corporations. Now, considering how much of a tax shortfall that we've been having over the past 2 years, the Democratic Party is going to say no way.
So then what's the ministry's response then, the finance ministry? What are they saying?
Well, we have to go back to what they were saying at the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, the ministry was saying, we are confident that we are going to have a tax surplus. But, fast forward 10 months and here we are. Having another tax deficit. And so the ministry is saying that, okay, so we're going to try to explore alternative measures like quasi-taxes, but I'm not quite exactly sure what quasi-taxes mean. Is it saying that it's going to make, is the ministry saying that it's going to increase fines? I'm not quite sure what those measures are going to be.
It looks like the shortfall was kind of due then.
Yeah, we have to look at overall trends. And especially with the way things are going, overall business trends, overall exports, business competition, South Korea's GDP not growing and nearly the kind of pace that it used to, and demographics. This is like a slow motion car accident that we're just seeing happening over and over again.
Right. So then just moving on once again. So South Korea and Japan, they're set to hold their first talks on the continental shelf development since 1985. It's supposed to happen this Friday, and it's mark the resumption of kind of long suspended negotiations on a exploitation of the Block 7 continental shelf. What is the Block 7 continental shelf? Remind us, John.
All right, so when Tongmin and I talked about this some months back, when President Yoon announced that there might be oil in the EC, we were talking about a particular part of the sea that was within South Korea's control. And so we didn't talk about Block 7 all that much. But Block 7 is a different part of the East Sea, the part of the ocean, the sea that Japan calls the Sea of Japan. Now, Block 7 is this particular shelf located between these two countries, and there was an agreement starting in the I believe the 1960s and 1970s.
1970s, yeah.
1970s, where these two countries agreed to try to explore that joint area for oil or other minerals that are perhaps under the sea. But as we've just pointed out, this is the first time that South Korea has been having this discussion with Japan since 1985. There was I believe that the original agreement was supposed to be for 50 years.
Yes.
And because it's for 50 years, this agreement is going to go up until 2028. So that's going to be about 4 years from now. And there has not been a whole lot of discussions between Korea and Japan over Block 7 because at the time, now, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but it has to do with maritime borders and maritime laws and what kind of international standards that there are.
Yeah.
And Japan was thinking that it is not in its economic interests to continue pursuing this with South Korea, which is why there has been no cooperation between these two countries over Block 7, despite that agreement that was signed in, I believe it was 1978.
Yes.
And so it's kind of interesting that this discussion is starting up again now when we only have about 4 years left before this agreement is null and void. South Korea obviously has a lot to gain by participating in these talks with Japan, but I'm not quite sure what Japan has to gain.
Exactly. Yes. So Japan will probably have to gain one aspect that the Yoon government and the Kishida government have been working on since the start of their terms is that there's a renewed relation with South Korea and Japan that goes forward. I think that the first talks that are holding, it's quite symbolic for the two countries to keep that going. And especially with the new elections coming up, I think that it's something just to solidify that sentiment.
Which is a really interesting thing to consider. When the new Japanese prime minister comes in, will the next prime minister be as interested in pursuing this as Kishida seems to be on, while he's on his way out? There are a lot of things that we have to consider.
In South Korea's fast-paced professional environment, staying informed is key to success. With a Korea Pro subscription, you get access to daily email newsletters, expert briefings, and exclusive events that help you stay ahead. As a podcast listener, you can now try Korea Pro for free and subscribe at a discounted rate if you like what we're doing. Visit koreapro.org/podcast to subscribe and get everything you need to stay on top in South Korea. Korea Pro, never be sidelined again.
All right, moving on for the final thing, week ahead. Now, one thing that we need to focus on is that the Slovakian Prime Minister is going to visit South Korea on Sunday, and he'll be here in the country until Tuesday, and he'll be meeting with the President Yoon. Now, there's going to be a lot of talks between South Korea and Slovakia. I believe Slovakia was also one of those countries that are interested in buying South Korean arms. So we are going to pay close attention to that. And all of this information will be part of the Week Ahead newsletter that will be sent to you on Monday by 2 p.m. So please subscribe for more. Have a good weekend.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
And I'm John Lei. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.